Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's watch.
But I love how she responded to me.
So she's number one now?
I talked to one and she's number one.
Yeah.
And I talked to the other one, the back even. So like, I really don't know. I don't see myself not proposing.
Oh.
I think it's gonna happen. It's just, I just honestly don't know with who yet.
Like in the past, like I've dated women and...
Okay, as a side note, we're learning that for Devin, Virginia, and Brittany are tied. Although it kind of sounds like he's saying Brittany is more often number one.
Every 4 hours.
Yeah.
For practicing games, and when the pain came back, I just took more. I got up to taking around 20, maybe even more every day.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's tough to say out loud.
So I don't want to start any rumors or anything, but the way he talks about his ibuprofen problem is typically the way people will talk about opioid addiction, which is a common occurrence for people in chronic pain. So I don't know if he's just saying ibuprofen because he doesn't want to disclose on national television that international television, that he was using perhaps illicit substances that he had to get on the street, or that he had an addiction or a problem with an opiate. But I will say that for some people, they can become compulsive about ibuprofen. It isn't like an opiate in that it doesn't have an intoxicating effect or a direct effect on one's emotions, if you will, the way that an opiate will typically. But it's possible that for some people, when they're in pain and they are prescribed or they know or their physician says, yeah, go ahead and take over-the-counter Advil or ibuprofen, and they take it and they get a little bit of relief, and then the next time they take it the same amount or down the line they take the same amount, it doesn't work, they're like, I need more, okay, a little bit of relief. And then they're just taking more and more, and there's a consequence, because if you take too much, it can have some negative consequences to your body, maybe severe, honestly. There are risks of taking too much, and one could be in a state of shame because you have this injury and you are trying to power through it, and a lot of your identity is in this activity of basketball, and you are in this quiet experience of pain, and you don't want to, especially for some athletes in some situations, because if they're identified by the team, by the coach, as having a problem, they might actually be discriminated against or forced to not play because the coach just as a policy doesn't want people playing through that, or is suspicious that if you're in pain, you're probably not playing in an optimal way or whatever. You know, I don't know what he was going through. He didn't really describe anything like that, but for people, they can go through it. At the very least, for some people, I think particularly men, but really everyone, will feel like they need to be strong and it's weak to be in pain. They might even have people in their life that are saying, just walk it off. How much can it hurt? And if other people haven't ever been through intense chronic pain, they might not know. It's not often talked about, but it is the worst. And so you're taking the ibuprofen, you're taking more of it. You know you're not supposed to. You're running to the store at night and buying multiple bottles, and you're just like needing some relief to get through it. And the doctor might even be asking you, how much are you taking? And you like drastically minimize, or you say, I'm not taking anything, I'm better now. And meanwhile, you're secretly taking all this stuff, and maybe even you have friends and family or a spouse that knows you shouldn't be taking a lot, so you're hiding from that. It has all the hallmarks of the shame, substance use, addiction, compulsion cycle. Then someone comes along, discovers that you're using a lot of it, and you attack them, not physically, but you say, hey, you're so nosy, get out of my life. And then that relationship starts to fall apart. So you start getting real hostile to people. It's just like, everyone's just trying to get between me and my Advil. And it has a lot of the destructive power of any other kind of problem, whether it be an opiate or cocaine or alcohol or gambling or shopping or whatever. It can involve that whole cycle, and without support and help and options, then people are more susceptible to that. So I'll put that out there. I'm going to assume that's what he's referring to, but I wonder, given the way he was describing it, if he wasn't using it as a euphemism. But, it doesn't really matter. And by no means am I putting a rumor out there. That's just like completely irresponsible of me.
Yeah.
Everything. I just hated my life.
Yeah.
I've always been a Christian, but as I got older, I didn't lose my faith in God or anything, but I just kind of like started to slowly move away from actually praying and knowing him and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could see it being ibuprofen, and what he's talking about is the anger at God or the world for the pain that he was going through and the need to take more and more ibuprofen, or he's talking about something else.
Let me try to go to the doctor one last time.
Yeah.
He was the first doctor throughout all the doctors that I've seen to seek what the problem was. Mm-hmm. And the pain is gone. So I just firmly believe that was God's doing.
I will say, I don't know if he is telling this story twice in one day as a way of testing, that's a bad word, but as a way of seeing how his potential partner would respond. And there is a pretty big difference, and it does reflect the way that they describe their personalities. Britt was viscerally empathetic, and empathy has a lot of different usages. People tend to use it as if it has one definition, but it has many definitions, and people will use all those. They'll use the word empathy to apply to different definitions. And I actually have done some deep dives recently, some audio episodes if you want to listen to those. And it was kind of a journey. I made like 4 chapters, and by the 4th chapter, I had finally landed on a solid hypothesis. I mean, I started with one system of typology, but over time it evolved. So if you want to listen to the chapter 4, if you don't want to listen to all of it, the chapter 4 is maybe the most important one. But I actually, in looking at all the definitions, both in the dictionary and the clinical literature, which has a lot of separate definitions and also the way people tend to use it, I think I came up with 8 or 10 different definitions. But they fall under 4 different main umbrellas. One being that empathy, we use that word as another type of word for compassion, where you care about someone and you want to help them, or you wish that the pain or the suffering that someone else is going through would go away. And maybe you would start thinking about how you could help that person. So that's one way that people use empathy. Another way is that you viscerally feel what someone else is going through. And it's important to know that you can have any of these types of empathy while having other types, but not necessarily. You can feel someone's feelings and not care, right? Or you can feel someone's feelings that you don't really want to feel. You could be on the bus and there could be a stranger who could be going through something, and you start feeling their tension, right? And you don't, not that you feel afraid, but you just like, that person's going through something. I don't want to go through this with them. So each type of empathy has its ups and downs and nuances. So a lot of times what we're hoping for in a situation like this, if you're Devin, is both the compassion type of empathy and sympathy, compassion, empathy type, and also the visceral, that someone's with you. I mean, the first one you would really hope, right? Because without that would be pretty bad in a potential partner. But, it's also kind of nice when someone feels your feelings and gets it and feels for you, right? Now, that could be a part of the first one. If you have compassion, you might, because Britt, was really crying. She's like, oh my God. And she was really with him, which it was nice to see. Virginia cares. She's listening, but she doesn't look physically moved. She might be. So it is interesting, the difference. By the way, the other two are the main types of empathy. The third type that I identified is in the clinical literature, and this type of empathy has to do with listening really well. It's the Carl Rogers type of empathy. So you can listen really well and attend to people and phenomenologically be in their world and try to understand someone while not necessarily having compassion. You probably do, but maybe not. And without necessarily viscerally feeling someone else's experience. And then the fourth type of empathy is to understand people based on where they're coming from. So you can have empathy for someone, say you are with your friend and your friend just got some really bad news, like they lost their job and they might lose their house, and they snap at you, and you have empathy for what they're going through because you know what is fueling their state, and so you have empathy, and so you don't react to them and you understand. It could be on that level, but it could also be on the level of understanding someone coming from trauma throughout their life and their current set of behaviors are explained or understandable, reasonable, given their entire life of trauma. And there's other types. So I call this understanding empathy. So I hope you can tell, like, each type of that empathy, each one is fairly different and distinct. You can have one without the other. You can have all of them at the same time. So we are witnessing right now, at least in a display, that she's listening. Her verbal responses, her active listening is there, but I will say it's more subdued than what Britt was giving. But I don't know. I mean, maybe she's going through a lot and she just doesn't tend to show it. She has been saying that she's more reserved than Britt. She doesn't tend to go deep or vulnerable or anything. I'm trying to look at my notes on her. We just haven't seen much from them. Either they haven't talked. In this date, she has disclosed that she has had a lot of bad examples of marriages aside from her grandparents. So I'm guessing she's talking about her bio parents, her parents having gone through some messy marriages. And then she talked about how she's been hurt by a lot of men, essentially, and she's a hard time opening up. So maybe more on the avoidant attachment side of things, or more on the scared until I get to know you side of things. I don't know.
I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
I'm just thankful to still be here and still be able to give back to the youth and play basketball, and
Yeah.
it just made me like never take any day for granted.
Yeah. I feel like that's what happens in life. Like, we go through these things and it's supposed to draw us closer to God.
So I don't know how he's receiving that. And she is crying. It looked like maybe she was, but she's definitely, and she doesn't have to cry, but that's evidence of that compassion and or that visceral empathy, which is encouraging, and I would be encouraged if I were him. But I have to say, the way that she responded, it has that vibe of look on the bright side of things. There's a silver lining. It's all part of God's plan. And for some people, that's exactly what they want to hear. But for others, it's not. What I'll tell you all as a jumping off point from this is, when in doubt, especially if you don't know someone very well, which they don't because they haven't had this kind of disclosure before, is to don't try to fix it. Don't try to provide perspective. Don't change the subject to yourself. Listen and just say, wow, I'm sorry you went through that. Or if you want to tell me more, then what happened? Or you told me that bit about that. How bad was that? Did you have anyone there for you? It's more centered on them. But at the very least, if those things don't occur to you or don't seem natural, you don't know what to say, just listen and just reflect. And if it feels funny to do that, because therapists will run it. When I train therapists, this is very important, and I have to deprogram them from the typical way people respond. There's almost like this compulsion to fill the silence that people will have that therapists definitely need to get rid of. And the thing that I tell therapists in training is it's supposed to feel awkward. It's supposed to feel unfixable. It's supposed to feel sad. It's supposed to feel like there isn't an answer, because there isn't an answer. It's extremely unlikely if you have a client or a friend or a potential partner that is telling you about something like this. It's supposed to feel maybe uncomfortable, maybe scary, maybe like, shit, that's sad. Now what? I guess it's just sad. Is that okay? Yes. And by trying to change that, it just pushes people away. It just validates them. And what she said might be, again, exactly what he wants to hear. I can't know. But unless she knows that, I wouldn't have said that. And I wouldn't have wanted to hear that if I were him. Let's rewind that.
I feel like that's what happens in life. Like we go through these things and it's supposed to draw us closer to God.
Especially that first statement. That's what happens in life. Okay, thanks. That's just, your eternal suffering from pain, and you're losing faith in God because of the pain and the ibuprofen is what he was saying. That's what happens in life, and that's what brings us closer to God. Again, might be exactly what he wants to hear. It might be exactly what a lot of people want to hear, but a safer, validating thing would be to just say, wow, that sounds really rough. You can center yourself if it's in the service of empathy. I'll do this sometimes, is to say, wow, I went through something like 10% in that direction, and it was the worst, and I felt like other people didn't really understand. And I don't understand what you went through because it's 10 times worse, but I'll tell you that I went through a little bit of it, and I think I can imagine if it were 10 times worse, just how demoralizing it is and how hard it is, and also how alienating it is to other people, because a lot of people haven't gone through that, or they don't know how to talk about it. And it can be very isolating, and you just have no faith in the future. And so, yeah, I'm just really sorry you went through that. So I'm talking about me, but it's in the service of that, and I'm not talking forever. Now, maybe for some people, that wouldn't be the right thing to say, because I'm focusing on me, or I'm claiming that I can imagine what they're going through, which might put some people off. It's the art of listening, and that's why we have relationships, is because over time we learn what other people tend to want to hear and that sort of thing. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please, truly, take care of yourself, because you do deserve it. You deserve to take care of yourself. You do.